and welcome to episode 7 of the Microsoft Spotlight podcast with me, John Jarvis, and my co-host, Andrew Price. This episode is proudly sponsored by BitTitan. So check out our website today, which is down in the description, to find out how BitTitan can help you migrate your data to the Microsoft Cloud. So, Andrew, would you like to introduce our guest today?
So I'd like to introduce Kathi Kellenberger, who is our first Microsoft MVP. We welcome to our podcast. So, Kathi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a Kathi Kellenberger, as you said, a data platform MVP who's been working with mostly SQL Server for more than 20 years. And I now work for Redgate as a technical editor and DevOps advocate. So I guess the rest we can leave the rest for the podcast. How's that?
Wicked. I'll say the first question we're going to dive straight into is obviously your background, because out of every single guest we've had on so far, everyone has a very much a different background, where they've come from. But yours, again, is another interesting one. So in the past, we've had someone basically worked with horses in the equine sports, but you as a pharmacist for 16 years. So how do you transition from being in the world of pharmacy into the world of IT?
Yeah, so I think for me, the transition was not that difficult, partly because of the timing. It was the late 90s, and which there were people just begging for developers. And I had been, since I had gotten done with university, I had been programming kind of as a hobby for different projects at my children's school or for around the house. And just started learning, at that time, I think Visual Basic 4, started learning that, took the certification test on it and managed to pass it, took a university class here and there. And so really the transition wasn't that difficult. It seemed like over that 16 years, I was always programming something. And be it the old Texas Instruments 99.4a computer we had for a while, up, to what was like Quick Basic, some of the built-in things into the old versions of DOS and Windows. And so eventually I was able to get some part-time experience doing active server pages, and that kind of just led into a full-time job. So it just was building over those 16 years. That was the direction I was headed.
So had you always had an interest in IT and coding beforehand, or was it just something that came about while she was a pharmacist?
It really happened my last year of university. There was this one class that it was actually kind of a computer class. It was an elective, and it was mostly vocabulary. And then we were going to have a field trip to go look at some real computers. So this is 1980, and so the university is really a college, I guess, really just one college, St. Louis College of Pharmacy. It's different now, but. They bought some TRS-80 computers and gave the instructor who was teaching that computer vocabulary class one of them for the class to use. And we had to type in some programs, and it was like something in my brain just turned on, and it's like in just a minute, I was obsessed with coding and what else can I do with this computer. But I was graduating just a few months after that from pharmacy school. I was going to be, a pharmacist the following summer. So it just became a hobby after that for so long. So hopefully some of your listeners will have heard of TRS-80, because that was pretty popular back then. So at the time, a lot of pharmacy was your manual typewriters and filing cabinets. And pharmacy was just becoming, just on the verge of becoming more computerized. Now every pharmacy that you would go in is run by computers, but back then it was very few were. So it was kind of like the beginning of that as well.
So at the time then, I'm guessing a career in coding just wasn't really there for you.
The timing was terrible for me. As far if I had been exposed, it wasn't really possible. because of just the timing. But if I had been exposed to computer programming in high school, I definitely would have gone into that field. I would have gone that direction, but I had not been exposed to it. And my brothers, just a few years younger than I am, were exposed to it. And so they went into the Army, but they did work in computers while they were in the Army and still do.
I mean, was there opportunities available to you at school to take on coding?
There wasn't any. There wasn't any for me. And really, in high school, it was, manual typewriters, electric typewriters, filing, stuff like that. There was accounting. There was nothing to do with computers because I graduated from high school in 1976, so there was nothing. and during my university, it was a 5-year program. The very end of it, I took that computer class, and previous years had never even messed with any code or actually typed any code into a real computer. And the school just bought those TRS-80s, and I was just lucky enough that I just happened to be in that class at the right time when they bought those TRS-80s, and I actually got to type in code, just a little program that might have been 20 or 30 lines long, but that was enough to just spark my interest.
And obviously, you was in pharmacy for like 16 years. So what changed at the end of 16 years that got you that opportunity to step into the world of IT?
I think there are a lot of things really were going my way. I have to thank a lot of people for helping me. One was my brother. He still does. He owned a little computer shop. He did repairs, and he started offering internet access. So this is like 1995-ish, 1996. And he knew that I was interested in programming. And so he just called me and said, "Hey, I want to start hosting websites. Maybe we can figure this out together," because neither one of us knew anything about what we were doing. Nothing at all. And that was active server pages were I'm not sure exactly when they came out, but that was, I found out about active server pages, and we started hosting several sites for local businesses with active server pages. And so that was really, and I was still a pharmacist. So I was going to work in my brother's store or just programming at home for him on days off from working at the hospital where I was working. And really over a year's time had enough experience that I could go apply for a job. So that's one thing. Another thing, it was just the timing. So in 1997 is when I left pharmacy and became a developer. And it was just a really great time to get into tech because of Y2K. That was really in my favor, I think. I was meant to be in tech, but the timing, I think, was good to get in there.
Took a detour in pharmacy while she was at it.
It was not even a detour. It was a total exit. Complete exit. Yes, I had been in this job at this hospital, and it was actually a pretty good job. I worked midnight shift every other week. So I worked 26 weeks of a year. Totally, that was what I did at the hospital, but then I had 26 weeks off. Or 24, I'm sorry, I'm adding, I guess 26 is right, 26.
Yeah, 26.
Yep, and so I had more time to start saying, hey, I'm going to start learning at the time, how to work with an access database, how to work with, Visual Basic for time. I took a C++ class at the local university, things like that. So, and now I can't remember exactly what question I'm answering, but it just really became my focus. And the job where that I was in, the the clinical pharmacist. There were two managers, a manager over the department, and there was a clinical pharmacy manager. And he was also in charge of the pharmacies network, which was Novell network back in those days. Oh, I think that's what they called it. It's like something I haven't thought of for years. And
I used to be a Novell expert back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. So it was a Novell network, and there were certain things I had to do at night as part of my job. And I wrote a couple programs for the department to help with some things. And so then he was going to move up to the head of the pharmacy completely, and they were going to get someone to replace him. And I said, oh, that job would be perfect for me, because they wanted someone that was good with computers and would like to do more clinical stuff instead of filling orders. And I thought, man, I want that job. I think I really am qualified for that job, and I want it. Well, then they didn't give me the job, and they said, well, we want someone with both a pharmacy and a computer science degree. We want someone with double degrees. And I'm like, that doesn't exist. I have that now, but that really didn't exist. So they hired someone that was just a friend of his and so that was kind of like, it was kind of like the moment I said, I am leaving pharmacy. I don't like it. I love development. I love, doing things with computers. This was my chance to have a job where I could combine both things, and I didn't get that job. I really felt like I deserved it. And so I said, you know what, I'm leaving this. And so it took me, that was 1995. And I said, okay, by 1998, I'm going to be out of pharmacy completely. Well, I ended up doing it a year before that. So in 97, I got a job at a small consulting company as a developer and quit the job I had at the pharmacy at the hospital, and have never worked in pharmacy again. Never, ever done pharmacy again, ever.
Also, sometimes like, obviously the timing and the year that obviously you started getting into the world of IT, I'm guessing, you work in a very male-dominated teams during that period of time as well, especially in the world of IT, because, women getting the tech in them early years just probably wasn't really existent, really.
Right. And I'm always hearing that it was better in the 80s than it was. The 80s was kind of the turning point where women stopped being in computers so much. I wasn't doing that back then. But yeah, so the first job I ended up getting, well, actually even just working part-time for my brother, I was the only woman working for him, which was not a big deal. And then the first full-time job I had as developer, that first job, there were maybe 3 men and me, and then my next job, I did that one for, I don't know, a couple of years. And then I found another job that was better. That one had a few women working there, but not many. And the funny thing is the other women programmers would never go out for lunch. They would always sit at their desk and eat salads. And I would always like to go out to lunch with the guys. And then one of them always said, I like it when you come out with us, because then the men have to be careful what they say. So they were better behaved at lunch if I was around. But I just, it didn't bother me at all. I enjoyed working with the guys. It was not a big deal. So I've always had this mindset that I wanted a male-dominated career. I've always wanted that. So with pharmacy especially, it was male-dominated until about the time I went to college for it. So it was there were three male pharmacy students to one female when I started pharmacy school. by the time I left, all the classes behind me were 50-50. It changed in the late 70s, and now pharmacy is female dominated.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It really is. So it changed. But one of the reasons that I was attracted to pharmacy is because it was a male dominated career. And part of my thinking is that's where the money is. It really is. It seems like the male dominated type careers, there's more money, and that's what I wanted. And I felt like there's no reason I can't do this, because I have the brains, I can do this. So I just didn't like pharmacy once I got in it.
So 25 nearly years later, so what are you doing now for Redgate Software?
Yeah, the main thing that I'm doing is that I'm editor for Simple Talk. So you might be familiar with the Simple Talk journal, where articles are posted and they're pretty heavily edited to kind of get them polished and make sure all the text's right. So that's the main part of my career, my job there. I'm also DevOps advocate, where I'm going to be kind of representing Redgate at events. Try to keep up with our software is changing a lot and evolving a lot as well. I try to keep up with SQL Server, and the whole data platform, but Redgate's software is also constantly evolving and getting better. And so like I might, do a presentation on SQL Monitor or on SQL Prompt, or, talk about DevOps, or, one of the things I just was playing with was this, I think it's a code name called Spawn. It's a command line interface. It's similar to working with Docker, except you might just start with a backup and you get it's much simpler than working with Docker. So any of these things I might be called on to demonstrate, or sometimes there might be a customer call I might get in on. But
you've had quite a diverse nearly 25 years. You've been a developer, a DBA, consultant, a trainer, an author, and now an editor.
I've had the best career ever.
And if you're getting MVP status, of throwing that a mix as well. You know what I mean? That's a big thing to do.
Yeah, because I was a developer, and then in 2001, I got in on this an engagement. It's supposed to be a 12-month engagement to actually do visual basic for application, VBA stuff, because I had done a lot of that, a lot of Access and Excel and WordPerfect macros, done a lot of automation there in my early years. And so I got in on this it's supposed to be a 6-month engagement at this big law firm, and they had me come in, but they weren't ready for me. So it's like I'm sitting there doing nothing except for my class assignments, because I was also working on a master's degree at that time, because I decided I wanted to get a degree in computing. So I was working on that. And when the 6 months was getting closer and they're finally starting to give me some work to do, and I started getting to know the people there, I'm like, wow, I really like this place. And then a DBA job opened up, and they didn't really have a DBA per se on staff, but they decided they needed one, and they really did. And so I applied for that job and got it. So that's where I got into the database part of it. And I was there for a total of 9 years. And it was a really, really good job. Really liked it. But I think eventually I outgrown it. And
so after those career question, isn't it?
Yes,
that's a natural career question. We all get in that position in our careers where, we look at what we're doing, and there's always a next step. I mean, I've basically jumped around quite a few times in my career, but I always like to think that basically that next step has always been to something bigger and better. I mean, sometimes it hasn't worked that way, and it's been kind of a step back. But I'm very much a person. I'm very driven, and that comes across in yourself. You're a very driven person that always knew what she wanted to do, and you've gone out there and just basically achieved your dreams.
Yeah, eventually, I figured out what I wanted to do around 1995, made that decision and made a plan to do it, and achieved it quicker, but then, so I was working on my master's degree 2000 to 2004, because I was working full time, so I was just going to night classes. And then when I was done with that, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have this extra time. What do I do? And so I started submitting articles to SQL Server Central and just started down that path of writing and presenting, and which is how I became MVP, I guess.
I was going to ask that. So, I mean, a lot of people that listen will know what the MVP status is nowadays, but you was first awarded an MVP in 2008. So
Yes.
what was the process then, and kind of how did you get awarded that status?
Yeah, so I know that, well, I had been involved with this book. It was the first book on integration services back in 2005, and it was just like unbelievable. I had never even dreamed of being involved with a book, but Brian Knight, the lead author, emailed me and said, would you like to work on this book? Because he'd seen some of my other writing. So sure, this is unbelievable. So that was there. Andy Leonard, I'm still an SSIS guru, decided that I should be an MVP. So he's the one that nominated me around 2000, I guess it was 2007 probably. And then I didn't get it, but I don't think you ever get it the first time.
You really don't.
Seems like a rule.
Yeah.
But I had been doing a lot of stuff, but I hadn't started on my own book yet. I think I wrote my own book in 2009, but I was doing a lot of speaking and writing a lot of articles and things like that. And so I didn't get it. And it's always been kind of a black box. You don't know exactly what they're looking for or who is actually making the decision, but you just submit what you've been doing. And so I guess it was Andy probably nominated me again, and then I got it. So that was April of 2008, and back then they had the quarterly. It was quarterly. Now it's like monthly, but so April Fool's Day.
And before it was monthly, it was every 6 months. So I remember I got awarded in the October, and obviously you had the awards in June, I think.
Yeah, and they might do it different for different areas, but I know I had mine on April 1st. And so it's just kind of like a joke. Oh, is this a joke? Am I really getting it? And they didn't really tell me I was getting it, so I really didn't know for sure until that day when I get this email that says, hey, congratulations, we want you to be an MVP. And at that time, I was curious enough that I asked the MVP lead, how many people I was interested in just, I guess, mostly SQL Server. I guess there were like 4,000 MVPs in the world. There were like 250 or 260 SQL Server MVPs in the world. There were approximately 60 SQL Server MVPs in the US, and 6 of us were women. So the number, I was in a really small club, really exclusive club there. Very, very few women SQL Server MVPs. And it seems like we've gotten better numbers since then. However, it seems like a lot of women, once they make MVP, a lot of them then go to work for Microsoft, and then they're no longer MVPs anymore, right?
So obviously you mentioned there's been 6 women within the SQL community when you started looking at it. How many women do you think within the MVP community? Because from my experience, I don't think there's a large number. I mean, I've noticed on LinkedIn recently that basically the first woman in Israel got an MVP nomination and actually awarded.
Yeah, I think the numbers are still quite small compared to the men. So I've got like a picture from one of the MVP summits a couple years ago where they tried to get all the data platform women together. And we changed, obviously they changed the name over time. It used to be SQL Server, now it's data platform. And there were probably about 15 of us in this picture. Obviously that's not everybody, because not everybody can make it to summit. But yeah, the numbers are still pretty low. So partly what I try to do is I find different women that I know that are interested in speaking and writing and try to help them if I can. Sometimes I consider it kind of a mentoring. Sometimes it might be just help them a little bit, you know, help them with a session or listen to a session that they're giving. Sometimes I might, I have one lady I'm actually working with after this call, and she's going to rehearse one of her sessions for me. And I've recently nominated her for MVP. So I'm, you know, really trying to pass it forward wherever I can. I wasn't disappointed, but I was kind of disappointed that I wasn't the person that nominated her. But we had First Black Woman data platform MVP in the US. I don't know about the rest of the world. And I had a couple calls with her and to encourage her and just, you know, see where she was, and said, yeah, you are going to be MVP. She did some amazing work in the BI space, Power BI. And then I was just really aggravated that I was not the person to nominate her, and she's made it.
So do you think mentoring is a big part of it? Because, and I mean, we've had conversations with a previous guest where, you know, she was basically talking about, you know, it's not about having that role model for women to basically, you know, aspire to, because there's not enough female role models out there to aspire to. You know, there's no point saying aspire to be like, you know, this particular person. That person doesn't exist.
I mean, yeah, it's difficult, but I mean, I think maybe you've got to expand your role models a little bit. I don't know. Whenever I started, there were two really great role models, I guess, for me, which were, you know, Kaylin Delaney and Kimberly Tripp. Those were the big names. Those were the women that knew the most about SQL Server, and they probably still are. You know, so, but then I also had some male role models too that I could look up to, you know, like Itzik Ben-Gan. You know, I'm never going to be as smart as those people or know as much as they do, but I can always learn from them and aspire from them. And actually, me even becoming an MVP is kind of a weird thing that I just didn't think of when you asked. At Past Summit, which is the SQL Server, big SQL Server summit every year, which right now Past has gone under, but we're hoping to continue it. We're hoping to continue that without the Past organization. But anyway, there was a session on how to make a name for yourself, a professional development session that I went to. This is back around 2004, before I even started writing. And I sat in this session, and the guy talked about presenting and speaking and mentoring and teaching and all these things. And I had never even heard of being an MVP. I heard about it in that session. And I sat there and said, you know what? I can do that. I'll be an MVP. And
here you are.
A lot of I don't know where that confidence came from, but I just said, I can do that. I will do that. And I was just finishing up my master's degree, and I was interested in writing, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. So
and here you are, 11 MVP awards later. So.
Yeah, the numbers are kind of goofy because I was at Microsoft for a couple of years, which didn't work out for me at all. I don't even want to talk about it. Just didn't work out. So I didn't have those years. So then I had to get back in again. So the years don't quite add up right from 2008 just because of that. But yeah.
So next question, what happened at Microsoft? No, I'm joking. The next question was actually going to be
probably just not in the right role.
But I was just joking.
Didn't work out.
What's been your role within the Women in 19 network? I know you've done quite a lot with past Women in Tech.
Yeah, I started back around 2009 or 2010, putting on some Women in Tech panels at events like Sequel Saturdays and stuff, and I kind of help the Women in Tech group, which I was just a member of at that time, start encouraging different, especially Sequel Saturdays, to do this. So that was a big thing that I was doing. I actually got an award for that when I was at Microsoft, because was working on that while I was at Microsoft, and I got the diversity award one particular year. And so I was doing that. Well, then whenever the lady that had run the group for several years decided it was time to pass the baton along, Ree Irish and I both stepped up and we said, okay, we'll work on this together. And so we started putting on webinars, encouraging women to speak. A big thing of our group was we want to get more women presenting. It not only helps their career, helps get them towards MVP status, so we were doing that a lot. I started a newsletter that's been pretty popular. So then when PASS went under, Ree left being part of the WIT co-leader when she went to work at Microsoft. So Ree's at Microsoft, one of the many MVPs that went to work for Microsoft. She's head of the MVP, the data platform MVP program though there, but continued on with our group outside of PASS. So basically, hosting webinars, encouraging people. A lot of times it's women will reach out and they said, I really want to be a speaker. I don't know how to get started. I really want to be a blogger. I don't know how to get started. So I spend time with women. I just set up a couple meetings with them and just spend time and encourage them and kind of show them how they can get started. So I've done a ton of that over the years. Men too, if they want to reach out. I'm happy to help anybody. So
for me, when I become an MVP, it's more that I knew quite a lot of MVPs basically from doing my podcast with the UC Architects. And I knew guys from all around the globe, and I was lucky enough when I obviously got awarded an MVP, I got to go out to Summit and meet all these people that I've spoken to for like many years over Twitter and all different mediums. And people like that basically, inspired me to go down that route of trying to become an MVP. So what I did for myself is kind of like set up a brand for myself.
Yeah.
And basically use that brand to basically then build my awareness within the communities that I basically was a part of. I think from that, it obviously did open doors. Managed to go out, do public speaking in other countries. And, it's not something that, when I first looked at MVP status, when, I want to achieve that, it's just something that naturally progresses. It's like, I can do this, I'm passionate, I'm driven, I know what I'm talking about. And it just spiraled from there. And that's why I've got, 3 plaques on the wall, my MVP status that I've had in the past. And now I've stepped away from the community for, a good couple of years. And I'm now at the point where I'm thinking, my family life is starting to calm down a little bit more. I think I've got a bit more time. I want to, start looking at, achieving that again.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. And a lot of times, especially for women, because they're often the main caregiver in the family, doing all this extra stuff is very difficult. So for me, I switched careers. I think I was 38 or 39 when I switched careers. I didn't get started doing the writing until I was in my 40s. And my youngest graduated from high school in 2002. So I didn't have little children around to care for. I didn't have, I had children, they were self-sufficient at that time. So it was easier for me. So sometimes, and even dads, why should dads miss out on seeing their little guys learn how to walk or say their first word or whatever? So it is hard with families. to do all this. You know, if you have the time and you can figure it out, you know, that's great. Or maybe it's just helping others on Twitter or forums or whatever you can do. And that's another thing, you know, you speaking of meeting so many people, when I do have sessions with women talking about MVP or talking about just becoming a speaker or a writer or whatever, I always tell them, and I hate Twitter. I am barely on it. I really hate it. But I do. I don't know why. I just can't get myself to go on it very hardly ever. But I just say, you know, start getting to know the folks on Twitter. Start getting to know the community, because that is going to help you. You know, start getting to know the people that are writing these books, or the people that you see speaking at conferences. Just start getting to know those, and that's going to be helpful. You know, and so they typically will do that as well. Just get to know those people.
So one of the things I saw on LinkedIn just earlier is people having imposter syndrome. So obviously,
Yeah.
you know, you want to basically go out there and write something, but then you feel like an imposter because someone else has already done that. And that's obviously, you know, a challenge in itself as well.
I get that a lot, to be fair. And I've got all the certs, all the Microsoft certs under the sun. I've worked in the cloud space for 10 years now, and when it comes to kind of going out and doing a blog or going out speaking, I think to myself, what I don't know what I can add.
I really feel like a degree of imposter syndrome is healthy, because if you think you know everything, you're going to be sadly wrong. So I think a degree of it is healthy as long as it doesn't paralyze you. You know, I suffer from it a lot, but it hasn't kept me from doing anything. You know, and if I really have a problem with it, I just sit back and say, okay, let's look at the facts. You know, I have written books that people really love and have learned a lot from. I have presented, you know, in 4 countries in the world. I have, you know, I almost always get chosen to be a speaker. You know, people want to learn from me. Those are the facts. Do I know everything? No. Will I ever be as smart as Itzhak Ben-Gvir? No, but there are still a lot of people who can learn from me, so I'm going to do this. You know, so if I had in my head that I was as smart as some of these, you know, T-SQL gurus, it would just be a mistake. But I can make a difference to a lot of people with what I do know.
That's great to hear. You know, having someone that's basically on your side, being a mentor. I mean, internally within my own company, Fujitsu, I actually did a session about becoming an MVP. I think I kind of put a lot of people off because you don't realise. I mean, it's a great accolade to have, but you don't realise what work is really involved. And obviously, you touched on it. Obviously, if you're a woman with a family, you've got obviously your family life to run, and travelling around doing conferences or user group sessions, and you know, the things that really are ticked in the boxes for getting your status every year, is hard. From a male perspective, it's, the world obviously sees the men that are going out to work, being a breadwinner, but that ain't the case in most households. Sometimes the woman is the main breadwinner. I know for my partner's mother, she was the breadwinner in her family. She was a midwife lecturer, and she basically went out to work while my partner's stepdad basically stayed at home and looked after the kids. So being an MVP, it's a great accolade, but it's also there's a lot of work involved, and no one actually tells you how hard it's going to be to basically keep that status. You see people come into the MVP community, they're there for a year and then they disappear because they just can't keep up with the workload that's required outside of doing your normal day-to-day job, as well as dealing with your home life and some of it. I mean, I had to step away because it's affecting myself, my own mental health, and I'm glad I've been away from it, but I'm now at the point where, you know, my life's a little bit more settled, that I want to basically, you know, step up to the plate and get back out there. And obviously, when COVID has now gone away, I can actually basically go to events and, you know, start putting my name back out there.
If there are any events. But that's the thing. Like, even when I was at Microsoft, I was still going to events, and I was involved with the Women in Tech, as I mentioned, you know, helping different areas have Women in Tech panels and all of that. You know, I was working on a book. Trying to think of which book. Was I working on? I was working on a book while I was at Microsoft. So for me, it's just natural to do those things. And again, I'm at a good place in my life where I can do that. And I did have the stay-at-home husband, dad for the kids. You know, even when I was a pharmacist, that happened just because we found it was just too difficult to have 2 high-pressure full-time jobs and try to raise a family. And I was more career-oriented than him. So I ended up staying in the career, and he's, you know, stayed with the kids. And now he's the stay-at-home grandfather. He's been helping with remote schooling. So it just worked out for us, you know, to do that, for me to be the breadwinner and for him to kind of keep the household, you know, going. And because I just don't like doing that stuff, and he doesn't mind it. So, but yeah, everybody, it's hard. It's like being an MVP is like having a 20-hour per week unpaid job. You've got your regular job plus this 20 hours. You know, you may not spend that much, or some weeks you may spend more, but I figure that's what it's like, having a 20-hour job. So I'm really in a great situation with Redgate, because Redgate will pay my way. Not only that, but being an MVP is expensive, because often you have to pay your way to conferences, right? You know, you may speak at a weekend conference and have to spend $1,000 to get there, for hotel and airline and everything. So I'm in a really good position where Redgate will pay for any conference that I go to. So that's really nice.
So it's very helpful when you've got a supporting
Yeah.
employer that understands what the MVP program is, and obviously what that kind of also means to them as well.
Yeah,
Because
it's
obviously
really
I've been
important.
rolled down in front of customers before and went, you know, oh, this is our, you know, our expert in our Skype for Business. So I was an expert in Skype for Business, and you got to get into them conversations. You know, it adds collateral to the business, and obviously how you then sell it to the customer. So it has its benefits for, you know, your employer, but also, yeah, it is another unpaid job, as you said.
Right. Yeah, it's like if I go and do a weekend event, Redgate's picking up that tab, but then I don't get days off work to do. You know, I'm still using my weekend up. But yeah, they are definitely very, very supportive, and it is important for Redgate to have. So there's at least 4 of us. I know there's 4 of us data platform MVPs that work at Redgate. I think they've actually had some developers that were MVPs in the past as well, I think. But yeah, it's really nice, because I think Redgate has a lot of good community. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but they're seen very well by the community. And then to have people that well-known folks in the community work for them, you know, that also helps their reputation as well.
Cool. So we spoke about the past, we spoke about the present. So what's the future? What's next for you, Kathi?
Well, I do not ever want to fill out apply for another job again. I'm going to say that. I feel like Redgate is going to be my last job, except for maybe teaching at community college or something. So I don't know. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And then at some point I'm going to retire. Because I have 5 grandchildren and I just love spending time with them. I've gotten into 3D printing. I've gotten into some other crafting things that I had put aside for 20 years. I had just not even done anything like that for 20 years, and I kind of started up. So I probably want to get good at those things that I can start teaching those things to other people. I have this problem where I always got to teach things. I don't know why, but I would love to be able to design my own files for 3D printing. Now I'm just downloading things. Maybe do some things like that. But I can foresee a day where, and I hope my manager's listening to this. Don't worry, it's not going to be anytime soon. But I can foresee a day where I retire from full-time work.
Oh. So Kathi, next up, Andrew's going to ask you his interview question, I believe.
Oh yes.
the interview question. Okay.
So what would you say is your proudest moment within your career?
Oh wow. I knew I was working on a book. It's beginning T-Sequel. This was in 2009. I knew I was working on this book. I was the only author. It was from my heart. This book didn't even come from my brain. It came from my heart. And it was for A Press, and they always send you a box of books, okay? And I get this big heavy box from A Press, and I know that there's like 20 books in there, whatever it was. And I opened it up, and I saw the spine of the books said Kellenberger. And I still get chills thinking about that. It just, even though I had spent 9 months writing that book, when I got the physical books in my hand and saw my name on that cover, it was, I'll never forget it. So I would say that was my proudest moment.
Brilliant. Cool.
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank you for taking time to spend with us today, telling us your story. It's been a really good episode. So thank you to everyone watching, and we'll see you in our next episode.
All right. Thanks a lot. It's really fun. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Microsoft Spotlight podcast. Please make sure you hit that like, share and subscribe button to help us promote our message. You can also follow us on Twitter at MSFT Spotlight, and we're also on LinkedIn, the Microsoft Spotlight podcast. And finally, we'd like to tell you a little bit about BitTitan and thank them for sponsoring this podcast.
Remote migrations start here. Let MigrationWiz do the work for you. It's fast, secure, and 100% SaaS, which means you can migrate at any time and from anywhere. Migrate mailboxes, documents, public folders, personal archives, or even Microsoft Teams with just a few clicks. No special training needed and no customer downtime. When the work matters, choose MigrationWiz.